There will be 3 speakers today with presenting 3 different parts of the webinar. All of the 3 parts will be look at NIS2 Directive, but from 3 different perspectives. The first speaker is Pištek. He is an independent cybersecurity auditor and researcher with more than 15 years of experience, and he will look at the NIS2 Directive from the cybersecurity point of view to explain what the directive is and then what will be the most likely impact on organizations that are following the NIS2 Directive. Then I will take over. My name is Radovan Semančík, and I'm one of the architects of MidPoint and then co-founder of Evolveum. I will present our view on the MidPoint and the NIS2 and how can MidPoint help with NIS2 compliance and what features are currently there and what we are planning for the future. And then the third part will be presented by Martin Handl, who is representing our partner Inalogy, and Martin will present a few short demos demonstrating some of the functionality related to NIS2 and compliance in general. So let's get started, please, Peter.
Okay, thank you. My name is Pištek, and I will talk about NIS Directive. The NIS2 Directive is a European directive on the measures for a high common level of cybersecurity across the European Union. And as a European directive, it must be adopted by the member states of the EU. Since this is NIS2, we already have NIS from 2016, but it has some bugs that leads to different approaches. Now we have different type of requirements and different level of their details and different methods of supervision among member states, and that leads to fragmentation of the internal market. And on the top of this, we have different identification criteria. I will demonstrate it on the next slide. And one of the goals of NIS2 is to eliminate these wide divergences among member states. And one picture for all, here are a number of operators of essential services. These are subjects of NIS. Data are from 2019, and we can see here Finland with more than 10,000 operators of essential services, and that's more than all other countries altogether. And it was caused by a very sensitive identification criteria in healthcare. The other example is Estonia, one of the smallest countries in the EU, and it has more operators of essential services than France, which is one of the largest countries in the EU. So you can see the numbers are quite different across the member states. And if you look a little bit close in detail in data from 2023, we can see Austria, Czech Republic, and Slovak Republic. Austria is the richest, Czech Republic is the biggest by population and has the largest numbers of SMEs and large enterprises, and Slovak Republic, which is the smallest by population and also by GDP, but it has the highest number of operators of essential services. This should be corrected by NIS2, and I know the data for Czech Republic and Slovak Republic. There are some estimations that in Czech Republic there will be about 6,000 subjects of NIS2, and in Slovak Republic about 4,600. So those numbers will be a little bit higher for some countries, and for other countries that will be a huge leap forward. I mentioned NIS2 entities or subjects, and there are 2 types of subjects: essential entities, which will be under so-called ex-ante supervision style, and they will be controlled regularly via audits and inspections, and they will have to follow more strict requirement than the other category, the important entities, which will be under so-called ex post supervision style, and they will be controlled only after some trigger happened. And for example, Also, the indication or information that an entity allegedly doesn't comply with this directive will be enough to start the control of the important entity. Current operators of essential services from NIS will be transformed to essential subjects in NIS2. And NIS2 has special focus on SMEs and their needs because they are part of the supply chain, and their compromission could lead to cascade effect, which will lead to bigger impacts in the selected member state. So the member state should prepare some free tools, knowledge base, and resources, including financial one, to help SMEs increase their cybersecurity readiness. And there are some thresholds how to find out if the entity is also the NIS2 subject. If an entity has more than 50 employees and annual turnover is more than 10 million euros, and this entity is in one of these 18 sectors, then this entity is at least an important subject. If it is from those 11 on the top, and it's a little bit bigger, it may be also an essential subject of NIS2. There are some exceptions in this directive. And for example, all entities in selected sector or subsector can be at least important subjects. For example, DNS service providers will be at least important subjects regardless their size and their annual turnover. And the other exception is if the entity is sole provider of critical service in that country, in that member state. For example, it provides some technology for energy and it's the only provider of such technology, then this entity will be also probably selected as at least important subject. And from the public sector point of view, public administration entities at local level will be also subjects of NIS2. For example, in the Slovak Republic, all municipalities with more than 1,000 inhabitants will be NIS2 subjects, and also education institutions, mostly due to their research. There will be also some indirect influence on suppliers because those important and essential subjects will have to adapt their contracts with their supply chain to add some cybersecurity items like SLAs, penalties, risk-based approach to their cybersecurity measurements, incident handling, right for audit, and so on. So the cybersecurity of suppliers will have to also increase thanks to NIS2. The huge new thing defined by NIS2 are responsibilities. And for example, management bodies of essential and important entities will be responsible to oversee implementation of NIS2. And those management bodies can be held liable for infringements. This is quite a huge thing. It's new in this directive. It wasn't there in NIS1 from 2016. And since we have responsibilities, we have also sanctions. And if the management bodies will not oblige the NIS2 or its local transition to the member state, then the local authority can prohibit temporarily chief executive officer or legal representative level in that essential entity from exercising managerial functions in that entity. And this will be also similar for important entities. So this is quite a huge thing because they will have to follow the NIS2, otherwise they may be temporarily prohibited to perform their function. The other sanction is temporarily suspend certification of all the relevant services. Currently, we are at the beginning of this path of cybersecurity in the European Union, and there are 4 certification schemas for products, common criteria, UCC, then cloud services, 5G networks, and artificial intelligence. And those could be temporarily suspended if the entity will not follow NIS2. And of course, there are some financial penalties similar to GDPR. The first line is for essential entities, and the second one is for important entities. There is one common deadline, and it's October the 17th this year, when all member states shall adopt and publish their transition of NIS2. And afterwards, there will be several deadlines, probably a little bit different. For example, in Slovak Republic, when the entity find out that it is subject of NIS2, it will have 6 months to be compliant with this directive. And in Czech Republic, it's probably 1 year. And for example, audit of new entities, again in Slovak Republic, this is currently under discussion, will start in 2026. This is a kind of specific situation because in Slovak Republic there is already audit process for operators of essential services. NIS2 is a directive, and it's kind of work from the technical point of view, and this is probably the most technical part of this directive. You don't need to read those lines, but for example, if you pick incident handling, it's quite a huge topic, and I don't know how to tell that I am compliant with incident handling. What shall I do? I will need some additional information. So basically, NIS2 is directive, and it's tell you what you need to do, what domains you need to cover to be compliant with, but how to be compliant in those domains. You can use, for example, ISO 27000, which is specifically mentioned this series in the directive, and I will specifically recommend you ISO 27002, which is a guideline for implementing cybersecurity controls, and it will tell you how to implement, for example, incident handling. There are several controls to implement incident handling. And since this ISO is mentioned in the directive, then this ISO will be probably used as inspiration for national transitions of NIS2. And there will be two lists, one for important entities, which will be a little bit shorter, and one for essential entities. For example, important entities in Czech Republic, there is a decree that is 12 pages long, and essential entities have a decree that is 45 pages long. So you can clearly see that essential entities will have more strict requirements to fulfill when trying to be compliant with NIS2. This is short introduction from my side to NIS2, and I will clear the stage for Radovan.
Thank you. For a start, I will get back to this most technical part of the directive, which is Article 21. As you can see, that there is not really many information to work with as an engineer. However, if you look at the list of these measures that you are expected to implement under the NIS2 directive, then you can see these that I have highlighted in bold. So these are the directives where MidPoint can add some value, where identity management in general can help. And there are especially two parts, and that's letter G with cyber hygiene. And when you read from the text of the directive, you will probably figure out that they consider identity and access management to be part of cyber hygiene practices. So that's where identity access management is hidden. And then letter I, there is access control policies, which is pretty much a bread and butter of identity and access management. So we do not have much to work with, but at least there is something that we know that an identity and access management should be part of this solution. Well, the directive is it is European Union directive, so it is technically vague, and there's pretty much something to expect. We probably cannot expect that the legislation, any kind of legislation, will be technically exact. So this Article 21 is probably the only really technical part of the directive. However, we expect that there will be further details in either in a national transposition of the directive or in so-called sector-specific regulations that are currently being prepared in European Commission. Even though we do not expect these to be really specific. So what we are looking forward are international standards that are, as Peter mentioned it, they are expected to be the guideline that we can use for compliance. Just to use my poetic license here, I used a little bit of guesswork to figure out what features of MidPoint will be essential for compliance with NIS2. Just at the beginning, a little bit of a warning. MidPoint or no other product can actually be NIS2 compliant, because NIS2 compliance is a compliance of an organization. So the product cannot be compliant, and no product can actually guarantee your compliance with the directive, especially a flexible product like MidPoint that can be used in 1,000 different ways. However, MidPoint can help. And this is the list of features that we think will be important for NIS compliance. There is, of course, the notarial things like identity lifecycle and synchronization and provisioning, access control with role-based access control policies and so on. A very important role will be probably played by reporting, because a lot of the requirements of either NIS2 or the international standards that are somehow implied there can be fulfilled with manual action, but the manual action or the manual policies need data to work with, and MidPoint reporting can provide the data. Audit trail will be important as well, as many requirements ask for detailed recording of operations and actions taken, especially during incident response. One of the not obvious pieces is probably application inventory. But some of you may be aware that that MidPoint is not managing only the identities of people, but we can manage identities of things like devices and applications. And application inventory is something like a catalog of applications that is likely to be very important if you take cybersecurity seriously. And of course, credential management authentication are part that are mentioned also in the national transliterations of the directive that we have already seen. Even though the directive is not technically exact, there are some interesting parts that are worth having a closer look at. One of the most important things to understand the NIS2 directive is that it's firmly based on principle of proportionality and risk-based approach. So the directive is not asking you to have perfect security, because that is something that is not really possible, but they are asking you to have appropriate security, or security appropriate for the risks of your organization. This is mentioned on several places in the directive, and the trend is clearly seen there. Another part is that the directive is mentioning best practice and international standards on many places. Therefore, we expect that the standards, international standards, are to be used as a guideline to guide the compliance with the directive. ISO 27000 series is explicitly mentioned there in the directive. So the bottom line is that if you are managing your security well, as you are supposed to, and your practices are based on international standards and best practice, you should not have any problems with compliance with NIS2 directive. There are a few more interesting parts that go beyond the usual, I would say. The first one is that the directive explicitly encourages the use of innovative technology, including artificial intelligence. That's explicitly mentioned in Recital 51. Then open source is mentioned as well as a technique of software development that is products that are efficient due to sharing of knowledge, which is very good for MidPoint, of course. And then the proportional state of the art, the measures are mentioned as well. And this is probably the first legislation ever that I recall that explicitly mentions identity and access management. It's mentioned in recital 89. So what it means for MidPoint? If we look at these interesting parts, then we can see that MidPoint is open source, which is already done from the very beginning of the project, of course. Then MidPoint is also based on principles of pragmatism, being proportional, being small for small solutions, and also being able to handle big solutions. So, like the proportionality is I would say deep in our DNA code of the product. And then MidPoint is also state of the art. We are improving it all the time to reflect the changing needs of the cybersecurity environment. And then there is this innovative technology and artificial intelligence. And we have parts of that already in MidPoint, and we are continually improving it, especially the artificial intelligence parts. You have seen first glimpses of that in MidPoint 4.8, and we are improving it already and planning to have new features based on artificial intelligence in next MidPoint versions. So you can see that MidPoint is supposed to be quite a good fit for NIS2 compliance. I would just reiterate once again that no product can make you NIS2 compliant or compliant with any cybersecurity regulation, but MidPoint can help, and MidPoint can help quite significantly. MidPoint can help with the features of MidPoint, of course, but MidPoint is a tool, and you have to know how to use the tool to be compliant. Therefore, we are preparing a special set of documents, and we have a special program in our company to focus on compliance with the NIS2 directive or ISO 27000 series and probably other cybersecurity regulations in the future. So what we are working on is, first of all, it's something like a statement of applicability. That means a spreadsheet that will tell you in which areas MidPoint can help you and how MidPoint can help you. That you can use this spreadsheet as a basis for your own statement of applicability evaluation for your organization and show it to the auditor to support your claim that you are compliant. Then there will be recommendations for MidPoint configuration. And of course, documentation of various MidPoint features, especially those that are relating to cybersecurity compliance. And for the future, we are planning built-in tooling that could evaluate you how compliant are, or what, if you are using MidPoint correctly to be compliant with the cybersecurity regulations. This is a preview of the documentation that we are working on. We have selected ISO 27000 as a starting point. Firstly, because it's international standard, so it's applicable to MidPoint community, regardless whether they are European, American, or based in other parts of the world. And secondly, ISO 27000 is a very technical, very concrete standard relative to how standards are written. So we have chosen this as a starting point, and you can see on the left part of the screen there is a list of controls that we already processed from ISO 27000, and on the right side is a page showing details of one particular control with references to MidPoint features and documentation and configuration examples and so on. This is still work in progress. We are working on it, and I hope we will be able to present the finished results soon. However, even the partial results are already present on our website, and you can use the link on this slide to access the part of the documentation that we have already done. And now it is time for Martin to show us few features of MidPoint that are related to the compliance.
Hello, everyone. My name is Martin, and I'm with Inalogy, and we are the partner of Evolveum and doing the integration projects. What I have for you today is a very small demo. It is intended to be less technical, more of a showcase how the tool as a MidPoint can help you with the NIS2 directive. And I have a very three simple use cases to be demonstrated. You shall see them on the screen. So the first one is how, if you have the running system and you have some findings from the audit, that you shall apply some SOD, segregation of duty rules, how to apply them and how the tool can assist you. Then the second use case is how you can report, for example, the administrators without the multi-factor authentication. So that's membership of the groups. And the last one, I have a detection of the modification of the access on the resource side. So if somebody adds manually by the system access to specific resources, it will be demonstrated on the CSV file. So that's what I have for you, and let's do it. So what I have here, it's a very small installation of the MidPoint. It's running within the Docker, and it's a latest Docker version available. So we have a standard system. We have about 18 users running in. We have select them, and we have standard persons. So those are the people who are working with the application. We have assigned them into the roles. We have some administrators. We have some application users. There is no organizational structure, nothing like that. And we have some roles. So for the purpose of the demonstration, we have created the MFA user role, and we have two groups for the payroll approval and payroll preparation. So it's a natural that the people who are preparing payroll shall not be approving that payroll. So what we are expecting is that the membership of that group, there is no overlap. Currently, if we look into the payroll preparation and look to the members, so we see the set of the people, and we can go back to the other group and look at the members, and we see that the users Rodriguez and Smith were also presented in the other group. So this is a small sample, but you can have a large organization with hundreds of users, and it might be not that obvious as you can see now. So if we have the funding and we are looking to find which people are in the groups which not supposed to be, the best thing you can do is to have some kind of report or simulate what needs to be found. So we prepare several tasks which will recompute the user. And what we did, we applied the segregation of duties between the payroll approval and the payroll preparation rule. So we will just run the task. We will recompute the users, and we would like to see the simulation results. And we see that as the segregation of duties had been applied, we have two errors. We can click there, and the MidPoint will show us the reports. And specifically for these two accounts, we can see that the violation of the segregation duties policy role has been found, and they cannot be assigned at the same time. So what we shall do at this time, when we want to be clear of this problem, we shall remove these people either from one role or on another. And the system will clearly provide you which are the users which are violating the rule. So that is the use case number one. Then we have another one. If we go back to the users, all users, and we see that we have 5 administrators or 5 accounts with the archetype administrator prepared here. And we have within the roles, we have MFA user roles with following members. So only 2 of these users got the MFA applied. As has been mentioned before, the MFA is really like not required, but recommended. We would like that all administrators are belonging in this group. So how to find out if the organization is really large? So the easy way is to prepare a report. So we have such a report prepared here. And that report essentially check which people, which the selected archetype are belonging to the group and which are not. So we will just run the original report, and we see that those three, which we've seen before, are without the MFA. So the corrective activity here would be push these people into the MFA group, and we would, in the good scenario, have tool like Heatlog or any other tool supporting the MFA, and within the tool we would force the second factor or use a passkey. So that was the second use case, and the third use case, it's a simple one. So as we run in Docker, we have a resource, and the resource is simply the CSV connector. Let me open the console. And we have a simple CSV file here showing that we have two records here. On the resource, we have Martins Johnson and Emily Smith, and they have these assignments. So we have such a user here. Let's find the Smith, and let's see what they have assigned within the window. So Emily is currently assigned with the APP1 LAN access, and we have it here. So let's simulate a situation that Emily got a friend on the between the system admins, and she asked for another access right. So now what we can do is as a friend of Emily, we will add another access. So let's allow the Wi-Fi. So what we just did, we changed the access on the remote system, and that's somehow not compliant with what we have specified in MidPoint. So what we would like to do, we would like to have a tool which will tell us that something fishy happened on the system and correct the situation. So very simple thing what we can do is we can just reconcile and preview changes, and we will see that what has been found is that this is something what's not supposed to be there, and the system is trying to correct it to what was there before. So the reconciliation happened. We will save, and let's look what happened here. We shall have a system where the Wi-Fi, which I add there before, it's cleaned. So this is how the system help us to identify and correct unwanted actions on the connected resources. Maybe a little bit of more of a showcase. If we look at the history, what happened, then we see the first one is my demonstration, and this one is what we just did. It's an audit trail, what actually happened, and we can see that there was an action happened on the resource, and we just corrected. The old value was this one, so manually added access right, and we corrected to the whatever we have configured in the system. So all the changes are tracked and recorded and are available to be produced in the other form of the report. So that was really it, small showcase, but such a thing maybe with the better extension, with the better detail can be presented to the customers. And that is, I believe, all from my side at the moment. Back to Rado.
Okay, let's summarize what we have learned today. First of all, the NIS2 Directive is harmonizing the European Union cybersecurity legislation. It is pretty much correcting the inconsistencies that were in cybersecurity regulation in last few years, and improving and strengthening the goal is to strengthen the European Union security posture overall. As pretty much expected, it is a directive, so it's technically vague. And we have to look for other information to find out the exact measures and controls that we need to implement. What is NIS2 pointing at is international standards and best practices. Therefore, specifications like ISO 27000 or NIST cybersecurity framework are the things to follow. What is interesting is that it's probably first legislation that mentioned identity and access management as an essential part of the solution, which is probably interesting for MidPoint community. And MidPoint is here to help, of course. MidPoint has already quite a lot of features that support the compliance, and more these features will be improved and added in the future. We are working on it quite intensively. And in the meantime, we are updating the documentation to help you with your compliance. And as especially NIS2 is a directive, which means that it has to be transposed to each European legislation individually, we expect that there will be some local variations in the regulations and some local details. However, Evolveum has a partner network in many European countries, and the partners are here to help you with your specific legislation and in your specific country, and to help you reach compliance. And that's all for today for NIS2 webinar. Thank you for attending. I will just like to point your attention to the next webinars that we are planning. The next one will be concerned with flexible authentication, which is a very nice feature that we have added in and improved in several couple of MidPoint versions. And it can add to the overall cybersecurity landscape. And then there will be a specific webinar for ISO 27000 compliance, where we will be presenting the results of our effort to document MidPoint features as they support the ISO 27000 controls. And that will be at the end of May. And the last one, there will be an introduction and teaser for our intermediate training in June.